Jordan and Gretzky, Serena and Ruth. Remembering great ones is easy to do. But what about the no-names who spent their whole lives long snapping footballs and catching sack flies? They're guys, remember that guy. Remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy, remember that guy. They're just gonna remember some guys now.
Oh no! Disaster! What a bad idea! Oh, what a bad Remember That Guy, the show where we mine our memories for nuggets of nostalgia about peripheral players, past and present. Hey there, folks, it's me, one of your hosts, James, and I know who I can turn to for a better idea.
Well, I don't know if I have a better idea, but maybe I have some better words to contribute. Diaz, back with you once again. We do have a very special guest. It's never a mistake to have him on this show. Please introduce yourself.
That's right. It's me, Jalen Brunson. I'm taking some time off from doing the Roommates podcast. Got to get ready before we beat the Celtics tonight. Gonna go for 50. It's gonna be a great time because we can all agree, fuck Boston.
We can agree on that. Yeah.
I have Celtics minus 5.5 in a parlay tonight.
So when you're not betting on it, you can agree.
Money's
fuck
not
Boston.
your feelings. Yeah.
No, sure. It is as much a hedge as anything else, and I don't know why. Anytime I do this, like invest anything, be it money or emotions, into a team that is a rival, they always fuck me. So, like, congratulations, Xavier. The Knicks are going to win tonight now.
Fingers crossed. I mean, if they don't, it's not the end of the world. I just want to see how they gel together with all the new pieces.
I'm just excited for the month of October in general. That's all I really wanted to talk about this week. I know there's a lot of talk about March, I think, every time we come into it, because everyone's also got that, like, fresh calendar year energy still kind of coursing through them. But every time we come around this part of the year, I just remember that actually October is indeed the best month. You've just got so much more drama. You had an absolutely phenomenal WNBA finals. I'll let Xavier go more into that. But okay, Game 5 wasn't good, but, like, it was a great finals. It was an absolutely incredible finals.
Anytime your second best player can go 1 of 19 from the field and you still win the game, it's a good game, except for the fact that it was a terrible game with a good outcome, as Diaz knows from my Doom posting in our chat.
Oh, I saw all of it.
You just didn't respond to any of it, so it was just me for 10 messages, then Diaz been like, with one sentence, and then me for like 10 messages.
Yeah, you didn't need more than one person just saying, hey, it's all right.
The one thing I'll say, and this is not to poo-poo on, congratulations to the Liberty, but as a person who has been advocating to certain family members to, like, hey, women's basketball kicks ass, you need to really pay attention. For the two preeminent games that I've been able to actually get such parties to watch to have been the gold medal game, where, my God, I don't think Team USA could have possibly played worse. And then this pinnacle Game 5, after, like, an amazing series, high-level shot making, both teams the whole way. And then Game 5 is just a fucking old-fashioned slobber knocker, slinging bricks at each other, and, not just bricks that are being missed shots.
Yes. Rock, fight.
They're just showing the highlights of Game 3. Be like, let's just watch this instead.
The team you wanted to win did win both of those games.
Yes, they did. The Liberty won. This is their first title. I am very happy. I know friend of the show, Cantor, is happy.
Friend of the show, LJ?
LJ is also very happy. This is a great time. I am excited. I hope that people show up for the parade. I cannot make it up there, but it's going to be a fantastic time. A lot of long-suffering Liberty fans. Lynx are a great team. Would not have been a disservice for them to win this either. Like, this was the two best teams in the league this year. No offense to James's Aces.
Oh, no, they were, yeah.
A down season by their standards. It was a great series. That was a very defensive series, especially with the size that the Lynx had inside. They forced a lot of outside shots, and the Liberty could not hit those. They shot very poorly, but I liked it. I had a great time. I understand Cheryl Reeves' complaints. The only thing I want to say is, after she complained in Game 3, they got double the foul shots in Game 4. I don't think it's rigged. I think WNBA referees are just not the best referees and are very easily manipulated by coaches. That is my entire point, because every time a coach complained, which happened 3 times in this series, the whistle went their way in the next game. So
I mean, that's basically what a head coach's job is. Like,
Exactly.
you have
Yeah. One
assistants
cannot
that get to scheme things up, and you have the head coach to yell at the ref until they do things for you more. I honestly didn't think any of the calls were super egregious, except for like Stewie traveled so bad off the catch, like really bad off the catch.
She definitely traveled. They couldn't review that part of the foul, which is kind of weird because if you're reviewing for possession, if there was a foul that wasn't called, you can't call the foul, but you can use that as a reason to award possession to the team that was fouled, even if the ball went off them last. Like, it would make sense for you to be able to review something that happened immediately before a foul call, but that part isn't allowed. So they couldn't roll back 2 seconds to see Stewie's travel, even if it was obvious.
Great finals altogether. I mean, I'm fine with you guys saying that over because I have nothing else like smart to say about October, but you've got that. You've got October baseball, like Shohei Ohtani gets off the Angels and immediately makes the World Series. That's great. October has a lot more drama than March. I know that March has the excitement of March Madness, but between both the beginnings of hockey and basketball all coming at once, with the endings of the WNBA and baseball, and with still pretty juicy middles of football at the pro and college ranks, I just think it's the most dramatic month. And as a lover of mess, I really enjoy October much more than March. I think it's the best sports month, and I've been enjoying it very much. What else have the two of you been enjoying in addition to the WNBA finals?
Well, for me, this isn't enjoying, but this is more so, we've made it very clear on this podcast. We don't like rich people, really. We think rich people are like pretty bad. And there's in the end, because nobody was hurt in this incident, I think it's a funny bad thing that a rich person did. But I don't know if you guys saw, Jay Cutler got a DUI very recently. He was arrested for DUI.
Mm-hmm.
Which
I saw that.
That's the most mugshot-ass looking mugshot I've ever seen an NFL player take.
I mean, his like player headshot looked like a mugshot. Like, he was definitely
He'd been practicing for that.
He really had. And look, there's nothing funny about DUIs. DUIs are horrible, and it's always good when people get caught. And in this instance, this was a DUI where nobody was seriously injured, but there was a crash. Jay Cutler, in his career, earned $128 million. And before the police were called, he tried to bribe the person who he hit with a $2,000 bribe.
Not enough. You got more money than that.
I haven't done the math on this yet, but I just want to see, assuming, and who knows what he did with his money, blah, 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 blah.
He's got reality show money now, too. Jay Cutler's got plenty of money.
So he likely has plenty. We have to go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 decimal point of like 0.000001% of that money is the $2,000.
You got to at least offer cash value of the car. That's the starting point of negotiations.
At the very least, like, to me, like, $10,000 would have been the lowest amount that he's not an idiot, and realistically, he should have been like, here's $50,000. Like, please don't make this a thing. But, in life, I think you can be cheap or you can be stupid, but you can't be both. Jay Cutler somehow managed both. Thank God nobody was hurt. Hopefully, he learns that, hey, maybe with $128 million, I can call a fucking Uber. Who knows? It just really tickled me that $2,000 was the amount that he came up with as a person who is worth so very much. And even though he is worth so very much, is still dwarfed in income by thousands of other people. It's kind of an insane system. Get better at bribing, Jay Cutler.
And Xavier, how are sports treating you aside from the libs?
So do you guys remember a couple weeks ago when I was talking about Diego Forlan getting into tennis?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, he's making his professional debut in November.
Cool. Is he getting this, like, how much is name recognition playing into this?
I'm sure a little bit. He is Diego Forlan, but he is competing in an ATP Tour Challenger event. So as we talked about with Juan Martín del Potro, this is like the second level of events. And this is the Uruguay Open in Montevideo. So Forlan's, homeland. and he's playing doubles with Argentine Federico Coria. So we will see Diego Forlan in a professional tennis match, and I have no idea how he and his partner will do, but wouldn't it be something if Diego Forlan wins a tennis tournament in his first ever attempt? I'm very excited to see what happens.
If he wins like a match or two, I will be like positively astounded. Not surprised. I mean, he's a high level athlete. And I'd like to believe that like with a certain amount of training, most of the truly high level athletes can probably do other sports to some extent. That being said, he wins a couple matches. That's fucking bonkers.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what happens. The tournament starts November 11th. So this is going to be a doubles ATP Challengers Tour event that is going to be for the ages. Do not miss this.
Happy Veterans Day. Well, to tide us over until November 11th, we've got some guys for you this week. And I'm particularly excited for Diaz to queue us up on this final regular batch of Season 11. Take it away, bud.
Well, while we're in Season 11, we want to focus on the big picture. And there's a certain category of guys that has an inherent everyman quality to it. No matter what they do, dudes around the world will watch them performing their athletic feats and simply go, hell yeah. Whether it's Dan Connolly picking up a squib kick and running it down to the 5 in the NFL, if it's Escalade on the And One mixtapes throwing no-look dimes, or if it's Butterbean beating the hell out of Johnny Knoxville as well as other professional boxing opponents, there's something that we all love about watching big guys in sports. So that's our category this week. We're going to focus on big guys specifically.
I like 'em big. I like 'em chunky. I like 'em big.
They are big, they are chunky, and no sport in American sports lends itself more to the big guy than American football. Obviously have a lot of linemen to pick from. I mentioned Dan Connolly, Vince Wilfork, a great nose guard, just clogging shit up down there on the defensive line.
And looks fucking great in denim overalls when he's just like tending a barbecue pit.
Which football player more than Vince Wilfork would you rather have their barbecue? Like
Andy Nelson, specifically the former Baltimore Colt that owns the best barbecue place in Maryland. Other than that, Vince Wilfork.
Pot roast.
Also pot roast. That's Terrence Knighton, right?
Yeah. And who's the Eagle that owns Wingstop?
Raheem Brock. Also, the former Temple Al. So there's plenty of big guys. There's plenty of good food chains. And as I said, we could go with some of those linemen that we mentioned, but that would be almost too easy. So I do want to go with the guy who had a proclivity for food, and he also had a proclivity for touchdowns. In high school, he was a 3-sport star, but he ultimately settled in under center in football. That's where he earned his keep. And we all know him by several names. The Hefty Lefty, the Pillsbury Throw Boy, the Round Mound of Touchdown. But he's also the pride of Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and my guy this week, Jared Lorenzen.
I've never considered this before. Is Jared Lorenzen related to Michael Lorenzen at all?
Not from my research.
Okay.
No relation.
I don't think I've ever put together that there are two people with the last name Lorenzen that I've ever heard of, because it's just those two.
We'll start at the very beginning. Valentine's Day, 1981, is when Jared Raymond Lorenzen was born in Fort Thomas, Kentucky. His destiny as a big guy was preordained. At birth, he weighed 13 pounds.
What's the normal size for a baby? I have to be honest. I don't know. I probably should at this point.
7, I want to say.
What did they say in Ricky Bobby? Like, dear little 8-pound, 6-ounce.
6 ounce baby Jesus.
Newborn baby Jesus.
That's the platonic ideal.
In my head, that's what about average is. But if we consider that as the average, this is not quite double, but over 150% of that sweet little baby Jesus. Growing up, obviously he was an athlete, and one thing that he had to deal with was just the opposing coach is always demanding to see the birth certificate. I think anybody that ever played youth sports, there's always the one kid that's just a little bit bigger than everybody. You kind of aren't sure if he's in the age group, but Jared Lorenzen was playing in the correct age group. And just as with most children, when you're first playing sports, everybody gets signed up for soccer first. Jared said he lasted about a month as a 5-year-old playing soccer before he would just lay down in midfield and cry because, in his words, the sport had too much running and he didn't like to run. So he just laid down at midfield and started crying until his mom would pull him out. Instead, she put him into Pee Wee football, and at his first practice, he wowed his coach when he picked up a football and threw it 20 yards, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for
that's
a
5-year-old. Yeah.
A 5-year-old throwing it 20 yards with a spiral, he's in awe of this. So very immediately, Jared Lorenzen becomes the starting quarterback for his Pee Wee team, but he still had to get over his phobias. He still had to get over his tears because if you're a quarterback, you need to get your hands right up on the center's butt to get the snap. And he didn't like touching butts, but he did manage to overcome this phobia and become the starting quarterback for his Pee Wee football team. He also took to other sports. Basketball had maybe a little more running than he liked, but he took very naturally to basketball as well. He started playing that in first and second grade and became a star player at basketball as well. He would always say that basketball was actually his best sport. And when he would be fully grown, he'd be 6'4". He had the height, definitely helped with it. But interesting to think that, basketball was the sport that he actually preferred the most. If you think about it, with him playing football, basketball, he also plays Little League in the spring. His parents also have 2 other children. So between shuttling everybody back and forth between different sports, school, getting to their own 9-to-5 jobs, there's really not enough time to cook at home. So they kind of settle into, frozen meals, Salisbury steaks, stuff like that. And vegetables were so optional that Jared mentioned that he didn't even know what cauliflower was until college. So
it is like one of the worst vegetables, to be fair.
It's one of the worst taken by itself. However, buffalo tossed cauliflower bites are maybe my favorite way to eat a vegetable.
Is that even getting you anything, though, if it's buffalo tossed?
Look, the vegetable's still in there.
And I mean, it depends on your buffalo sauce, too, right? Like a creamy buffalo sauce, that's not going to be too great. But if we're more liquidy based on, the cayennes and all that, then I think we're actually not doing too bad. It's just spicy cauliflower. It all depends. But Jared Lorenzen didn't know anything about cauliflower. Maybe if we had some buffalo cauliflower bites, he wouldn't have become the hefty lefty that we came to know and love. But in spite of this diet, he's still so active that it's really not a problem up through middle school. And at this point, he's still just tall but proportional until when he's in 7th grade. His parents get a divorce and he moves in with his dad. And whatever slight semblance of a diet or nutrition that his mom was able to keep in place with the family goes completely out of the window now that dad's in the picture and the only one looking out for his diet. First of all, they never cooked at all. Every night it was just rotating between KFC, pizza, McDonald's, all that stuff. But for dessert on a nightly basis, he would go through a box of Hostess and a 2-liter of Mountain Dew every single night, in addition to all the food that he's already eating.
Xavier, this is how you must feel when we talk about the injuries and stuff, because that's just horrific to me.
That's a lot of Mountain Dew.
It's now starting to become a little bit of a factor for him, and especially when you consider that, well, in high school football, there's no sort of weight limit to worry about. For the 8th grade football team, there is a weight limit. It's 155 pounds. And just a month before weigh-in day, he was weighing in at 175. So he's got a ways to go if he's going to make the team. For the entire month of August leading up into weigh-ins, he begins doing 3-a-day workouts. Practices doing 2-a-days with the high school football team, then has night practice with his Pee Wee football team, then stays and does some additional conditioning afterwards. For this whole month, the only things he's eating is in the morning, he's having skim milk and Wheaties, and he's eating grapes throughout the day. That's literally it. When it comes down to weigh-in day, he's the first one on the scale, and with the 155-pound weight limit, he comes in at 156.5. But if you know how these weigh-in things go, you usually have the person you're most worried about go first, so that if you don't see the number that you want, you have time for them to go and lose it. So, Jim,
go and lose it is such a artful way of putting it.
It's the only way to put it. That is even a little bit tactful. But he goes into the basketball gym, puts on sweats, and just starts running like crazy, trying to lose this 1.5 pounds however he can. And as his teammates finish their weigh-ins and they come back in successfully, they're trying to keep the team spirit up, so they start running the sprints with them. Until finally, it's the whole team doing the sprints, and the coaches say, okay, it's now or never. You got to get on the scale. He strips down fully. They cover him up with a towel so that he's not exposing himself to everybody. After an hour of running sprints, he gets on the scale. It reads exactly 155 pounds. So he's able to play for his 8th grade football team. But he says he celebrated immediately afterwards by downing a plate of brownies, and he would never see 155 pounds again. Going into high school, he's now playing for Fort Thomas Highlands, and by this point, he's bigger than every lineman that's blocking for him. But he still retained his incredible athletic gifts. He plays football, basketball, and baseball, starting all 4 years of high school. And again, he's not just a big guy. He is also like a tall guy. Like he's 6'4", and in high school as a senior, he taps out at 6'4", 265 as a quarterback. But his incredible athleticism is apparent across all the sports. He's the ace pitcher and the catcher for the baseball team. In basketball, he's the starting point guard at 6'4", and leads his high school to the round of 16 in the state tournament for Kentucky. But obviously, we're talking about the round mound of touchdown. His greatest exploits are going to be on the football field. For his senior season in 15 games, Jared Lorenzen throws for 3,400 yards and 45 touchdowns. He runs for 900 more yards and 15 additional touchdowns. He leads Highlands to a perfect 15-0 record, and they cap it off with a 56-7 win in the state championship game. For the entire season, his team scored 801 points. And for these exploits, Jared Lorenzen was named Mr. Kentucky for the sport of football for his senior year.
I just can't imagine the resignation one must feel in high school knowing you're about to have to try to tackle that person moving towards you.
Well, there is some Jared Lorenzen high school film out there if you go digging deep enough. And if you know us, we go digging deep enough. It's absurd because, not only is he the biggest player on the field, he's also the fastest player on the field. So most of the time, he doesn't even have to, shake off a tackler. They're literally not even touching him. And then on the off chance that you do actually get to him, he's just going to fling you off with his right hand and then chuck it 50 yards downfield with his left. There's one clip I saw where there's literally a player draped around each ankle trying to get him down. And just with his upper body, he twists and throws a 30-yard rope. Absolutely disgusting displays of arm talent. And on the back of that, he is Mr. Kentucky. He's going to stay true to his roots, and he's going to accept a scholarship to go play for the Kentucky Wildcats. He redshirts for his first year, and then coming in as a redshirt freshman, he earns the starting job. Throws for 3,687 yards, but has a 19-21 TD-INT ratio, and Kentucky goes 2-9. For his sophomore year, his weight is starting to become a little bit more of an issue. In high school, he topped out at 265. His sophomore year, he now weighs 292. Nonetheless, he retains the starting job, and Kentucky still has a pretty bad season. They go 2-9, but Jared makes some steps as a quarterback. While his passing yardage falls to 2,200, he does a much better job of taking care of the ball, 19 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. As a junior, the program has a little bit of a mini resurgence. They end up going 7-5, and Jared throws a career-high 24 touchdowns with 5 interceptions. 7-5, you think Kentucky might be going bowling, but the coach that recruited Jared Lorenzen had since been fired for some NCAA violations, which also left Kentucky bowl ineligible. So their bowless streak must continue until his senior season, where they are now again bowl eligible. Mid-season, they find themselves at a 4-4 crossroads when they play host to Arkansas. In front of 66,000 fans in Lexington, the two teams played an instant classic. At the end of regulation, it's tied at 24, and they play not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, yes, 7 overtimes.
It's Indiana Penn State levels, or was it Illinois Penn State?
It was Illinois Penn State, but that's with the bullshit one play from the 3-yard line
2-point
rule,
conversions,
which sucks and is terrible. This is back when you still had in the third overtime, if you scored a touchdown, you had to go for 2. But we're still playing like actually a semblance of football at this point. It's 63-all going into the 7th overtime. Arkansas gets the ball first. They score a touchdown to go to 69. Very nice. And they get the 2-point conversion when Matt Jones completes it to Jason Peters. Yes, Eagles legend Jason Peters, still somehow bouncing around the NFL, Jason Peters. On their possession, Jared Lorenzen takes the field. He's already had a pretty good game. 28 of 49, 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, 40 more rushing yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. And the hefty lefty wants to make it 4. He tucks the ball down. He's rushing for the end zone. When he fumbles it, Arkansas gets on it, and Kentucky falls in this instant classic of a game, 71-63. I mentioned this was kind of the crossroads game for Kentucky. This led them down bad crossroads. They lose out the rest of the year. They go 4-8, and Jared Lorenzen graduates from Kentucky, having never led the Wildcats to a bowl game. However, he does have his Colt status as the hefty lefty. He's now tipping the scales at over 300 pounds as a senior. And not only has his weight become prolific, so too has his place in the record book. He graduates from Kentucky as the all-time program leader in attempts, completions, and passing yards, and passing touchdowns. He still holds all of those records except for the passing touchdowns record, which was taken by his immediate successor, Andre Woodson. Now, obviously, the raw stats themselves are pretty impressive, but you never led Kentucky to more than 7 wins in a season. We have these concerns about your weight. So going into the NFL draft, Jared Lorenzen has some interest, but does go undrafted. It is Tom Coughlin and the Giants that bring him into training camp for an invite. He competes for
absolutely appropriate.
To the Giants, yes. He competes for the third quarterback spot in training camp. He ultimately wins it, but his first 2 years, he's just that emergency quarterback. There are no emergencies. So he just stays on as the third string. For 2006 season, he again starts as the emergency quarterback. Later into the season, he starts earning the backup spot. And mostly this is due to Tom Coughlin wanting to have an ace up the sleeve in case of a short yardage situation. So in week 17, they're playing the Seahawks. They need a win to try to get in the playoffs. And there's a big 3rd and 1. Tom Coughlin calls out Eli Manning, puts in Jared Lorenzen, and we get the tush push without the push is how I want to call this, because you don't need a pusher when you have 300 pounds of man just getting low and pushing. And that's exactly what it is. On a 3rd and 1, Jared Lorenzen gets 3 yards. And Tom Coughlin thinks, maybe I have something here. The Giants go on to win that game. They go against the Eagles in the wild card round. And sure enough, it's, I believe, the second quarter when they have another 3rd and 1. Out goes Eli Manning. In comes Jared Lorenzen. And he gets the 2 yards to get another first down. These are the only 2 plays that he plays for the entire 2006 season. The Eagles go on to win that wild card game. But
100% success rate.
2 for 2 first downs. Cannot stop him. You can only hope to contain him. And now knowing that they have that kind of ace up their sleeve, they go into the 2007 season, and Lorenzen is just outright named the backup. While they don't employ the strategy again, he does see action in 2 games. Goes 4 of 8 across those 2, replacing an injured Eli Manning. No touchdowns, 49 passing yards. While he doesn't see any action in the playoffs, 2007 Giants did a pretty crazy thing. They beat the 18-0 Patriots to make them go 18-1, denied them their undefeated season, and because of this, we are talking about Super Bowl 42 champion Jared Lorenzen. He gets to go out on top. He gets to go out to Disneyland, ride all the rides, and then he gets to get cut by the Giants. You know, he's seen his Giants career come to an end. And I mean, for him, it was a stressful time as well because Tom Coughlin mandated it. He literally had in his contract that for every day that he weighed over 300 pounds, he would be fined. So his playing weight for the Giants is pretty consistently 298, 299, just really flirting on that edge. After being done with the Giants, he's still going to bounce around a little bit. He signs with the Colts for their practice squad, but ultimately is cut going into the regular season. And this ends his NFL career, but he's still going to bounce around for a couple more. He goes to the Arena Football League's AF2 league. We forget that the Arena League used to have its own minor league, the AF2.
So it is a minor league and not a tier system? Because you say forget. I did not know.
No, it was like the same relationship as the NBA has with the G League was the AFL with the AF2. So he signs for 1 year to go home to play, and this is probably more like he probably had offers in the AFL, but in the AF2 you have the Kentucky Horsemen. So he gets a chance to go home, be a hometown legend. He has a pretty successful first season with them, but he is unable to have a year two because the team declares bankruptcy and no longer exists. With him not playing anymore, now his weight is starting to become even more of a problem because he's been as big as he is while still working out at the lengths that a professional athlete is going to work out. And with this out of the picture now, it starts to become more of a problem. He is coaching for his high school team, Highlands, but by the time it gets to 2011, he has now gone up to 400 pounds, 4 years removed from the NFL. He signs on to be the general manager at first of the Northern Kentucky River Monsters of the Ultimate Indoor Football League. You might remember this league as the league of Johnny Football, of Antonio Brown, not paying any of his players. This is the league that we're talking about. And Lorenzen, as the general manager, is in control of the roster, and he just has to get back on the field. To him, he thinks it's the one thing that can maybe motivate him to get back in shape. So he ends up going back onto the field, plays a couple seasons before he is ultimately named as the commissioner of the league, which is going to detract from his playing abilities. So he again goes away from playing, starts putting on weight again, and balloons up to 450. Now that he's at 450, one more time, he wants to try to make a comeback, and he's going to play for those same River Monsters of Northern Kentucky. Has a good first game, but in his second game, he takes off for the goal line. He's trying to dive for the end zone when he takes a hit low, and he breaks his tibia. This not only ends his football career, but now with his weight issues having already been a constant throughout his life, he is now off his feet for the recovery period, and it goes from bad to worse. By the time that he sat down for an E60 interview with ESPN and Jeremy Schaap in 2017, he had ballooned to 560 pounds, the absolute max weight that he would ever weigh in at. Part of why it got so bad is that he had a phobia of scales because he has some of these, frankly, traumatic incidents that go back to the scale, whether it's having to weigh in at 155 pounds for his 8th grade football team, whether it's stepping on the scale every time he's with the Giants and not knowing if he's about to lose money because of it. He has a very unhealthy relationship with the scale specifically, in addition to his obviously poor diet. When he was made to step on the scale, he said this was as much of a come to Jesus moment as you could possibly have. His doctors also mentioned that he was already going through congestive heart failure. And at this point, he's also a father. He had a 15-year-old daughter. He had an 8-year-old son. So he starts down his path to start his weight loss journey. And he gets down to 490 pounds after about a year. As these things go, they're not linear. Begins putting some weight back on. And unfortunately, the story does not have a happy ending. Jared Lorenzen would pass away on July 3rd, 2019, due to heart and kidney problems, which were largely exacerbated by his weight issue. And like, I hate to end this story on such a down note because so much of Jared Lorenzen's career was about the joy that he brought to people. And I mentioned at the start of this category that there's just something about seeing a big guy out there that makes it feel more relatable to us, you know, regular humans. The idea that here's this guy out there that might have problems with dieting similar to my own, but he's still out there performing at a high level. There's some inspiration in that. And Jared Lorenzen does leave behind a legacy, at least I can say that, because when he began his own weight loss journey, he did start the Jared Lorenzen Project, which started a whole bunch of initiatives in Kentucky to get kids active, whether it's 5K walks, 5K races, different programs to give parents and children nutritional advice. He recognized the ability that he had to inspire others to try to not make the same mistakes that he did. And even though in his own specific case, it has a sad ending, I think there is something noble about the fact that he still dedicated his last years to not just trying to get himself in shape, but trying to be a leader and be a role model for his children, for all kinds of children in Kentucky. And if nothing else, I hope that this story at least lends a little bit more to it's fun to meme about the hefty lefty and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, this was a man who had an addiction that he was struggling with his entire life, be it due to personal factors, environmental factors. And, you know, sometimes your own willpower is not enough. And I am at least hopeful that he has helped to instill the systems in Kentucky that can make sure that the next Jared Lorenzen type athlete to come through will have the resources to see himself out to his true potential. But that's my guy this week, the hefty lefty, the round mound of touchdown, Jared Lorenzen.
The only thought that I'll add to that is there are fights that we know we are going to lose that we do still have to fight. Great story.
Right.
Love it. Well, with this category of very large guys, you look across all the sports and generally to this point, being big has been a desirable trait. So you can really look at any sport. But something that I think was interesting as I started to look into this is we really have seen some shifts in recent years across many sports to be more kind of size agnostic. Like if you look at hoops, we've had lineups that feature dudes like Draymond Green and PJ Tucker at the 5. In football, we've had like a bunch of the short king QBs with Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield having some success, Kyler Murray and Bryce Young less so, but like teams are still willing to take a chance on these smaller guys. Even in hockey, there's like this general uptick for all skaters that we see on a team like my Vancouver Canucks. Both Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson both kind of fell to them in the draft because of size concerns, and that has worked out pretty well for the Canucks. But in hockey, I did make sure to say that that is the case for skaters, not all positions, because goalie in hockey has not gone this way. And I think like that makes sense. In any sport, if you have a bigger guy, that's more of the goal that is blocked. And in particular with like how the role of the goalie has developed, you've seen pads and protective equipment get bigger and bigger over years. You've seen the goalies develop the butterfly style to try and like make themselves bigger within the space of that goal. And if anything, like players on average have gotten a little bigger. Many of the goalies at the top of like the tallest all-time ranking are either playing right now or very, very recently were playing. So it is a recent history from which we pull these large goalies. And that is where I pull one of these big old boys for my guy this week, Mikko Koskinen.
Okay. I'm intrigued.
Sounds Nordic.
It is Nordic. It's Finnish specifically. Right? Yes. We head to a city called Vantaa in Finland, and that's where in July of 1988, Mikko Koskinen is born. For the record, also the hometown of Lauri Markkanen. So not the only sport that they are producing there, but hockey, going back as far as I can find for Mikko Koskinen, is the sport for him, and the whole time that I can find any info on him, he is a goalie. His earliest stats come in 2004-2005 when he's a 16-year-old with the Espoo Blues, now Kiekko Espoo. They are part of the Finnish Mestis League, which is the second tier one. Even then, they do still have like an under 20 team and an under 16 team as this kind of like second tier team. So there's levels even within it. As a 16-year-old, not particularly great. He has an 867 save percentage that first season, and then it gets a little bit better, 883. But at that point, the team in front of him is also so bad that like the higher shot volume still sees him in that 883 season, giving up 5 goals on average. Over the next couple of years, he's splitting time with the U16 and U20 teams on the Espoo side. He's also has a season over at Kiekko Vanta in his hometown. Kiekko, I have learned, it just like in Finnish kind of means puck. So anytime you hear a team with Kiekko in there, think like blank FC for a small town football team. It's basically the same thing. In the first year in which he is draft eligible, 2006-2007, he's picking up a little bit now. This is the one with Vanta where he has a 927 save percentage, but he still goes undrafted. Next year with the Espoo Blues, he's still mostly the junior team, but now he is finally starting to get some U20 exposure there. And between the two, a 907 save percentage. Respectable, but still going to go undrafted. It is not until 2008-2009 when something finally changes. His save percentage goes all the way up to 930 that season, playing almost exclusively with the senior team for Espoo in 33 games. The stats have turned a corner. Would you like to guess the thing that has changed this year, leading to his stats getting better?
Taller.
It is a growth spurt that has shot him up to 6'7". He's weighing 195 pounds, this 20-year-old Finnish goaltender. And now with these measurables, with this like biological advantage that he has gotten, those and the stats, they are going to start catching some scouts' eyes. Now, the scouts, when they're looking, they keep kind of picking up on the same thing. So I'm going to read a couple quick reports from his draft prospect profiles. Right up from writer Max Geese. Calls him a large hybrid goaltender with leadership, making sure to all caps the large there. Christopher Ralph at the Hockey Writers, obviously given his size, his quote-unquote biggest asset is just that. And with his hybrid style, he seemingly covers the whole net. And then this one from Alan Bass in the Hockey News, maybe goes a little too far. He's a monstrosity, even by today's goaltending standards. While a lot of this sounds like kind of damningly faint praise of his skills versus his size, he is still generally looked at as the number 2 European goalie prospect behind Robin Lehner entering the 2009 NHL draft. There are a lot of recognizable stars in the first round. Got your boy Chris Kreider is here in the first round for the Rangers. We've also got Nazem Kadri, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Matt Duchene, and at the top of that list is John Tavares, who goes first overall to the New York Islanders. The New York Islanders are also first on the clock for the second round, and that's when they throw a little bit of a curveball. They make Koskinen the first goalie taken off the board. At the time, a lot of people are attributing this to the fact that like there is a fellow Finnish goaltender out there, Pekka Rinne, who is one of the best goalies in the league at this point, and he is also 6'5". And so this really, for this draft, kind of seems to be the guiding principle. Lehner, who's 6'4", joins Koskinen there in the second round. And altogether, 18 of the 21 goalies drafted this year are at least 6 feet. Even the Islanders get a double dip when they start the third round off with another really big Scandinavian, Anders Nilsson, measuring in at about 6'4". So right around his 21st birthday, he signs this 3-year entry-level deal, and the plan is to have him in the AHL quickly so that he can provide depth if needed for the incumbent that they have this year, Rick DiPietro. He is going to very quickly, if all goes well, factor into the Islanders' plans for the future. And then 2 games into his AHL career with the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, we run into the thing that happens with big guys a lot, either with someone like a Jared Lorenzen. Nowadays, Diaz, sorry to bring this up, but someone like a Joel Embiid. Big guys, they deal with a lot of injuries. It is tough for a big body to move like that. And so just 2 games in, he suffers a torn labrum that keeps him on the shelf for 4 months right at the beginning of his North American pro career. By the time he's healed up, the Islanders org has like shuffled around goaltenders at different levels. And so now he's going to actually go to the ECHL with the Utah Grizzlies. Goes undefeated in 6 games with the Grizzlies, helps them get to the second round of the playoffs that year before they lose to the Idaho Steelheads, and then has just enough time to also play for the AHL club, the Bridgeport Sound Tigers, for their first round of the playoffs, where they unfortunately lose to the Hershey Bears. Starting to find his footing now that his labrum is functioning again. And 2010, 2011, while he opens the AHL again, there's good news and bad news. The bad news is that even though he is at the AHL, there's still a lot of people ahead of him on the depth chart. You've got Rick DiPietro. You also have Al Montoya, who the Islanders have acquired by this point. But the good news is this year, Koskinen stays healthy, and almost everyone else on the depth chart does not. So he does eventually get his NHL call-up on February 8th, 2011, when he makes his debut at home against the Leafs, and he lets in 5 goals on 26 shots. So not the best debut, but they're in desperate need of someone to cover a stretch where they're going to have a lot of games all at once. And so 2 days later, on the road in Montreal, completely different game. Stands on his head. This 22-year-old stops 37 of 40 shots in a 4-3 win for the Islanders, picking up his win in his second start. And then the next game, now their third game in 4 days, he only allows 3 goals on 38 shots. 2 days later, plays his 4th game in 6 days. And now maybe some wear is starting to show on this like big bodied dude. He allows his 4th goal just 4 minutes and 31 seconds into the second period on his 14th shot faced. Gets replaced by Montoya for the rest of the game. Montoya helps them hold on for a win. And so Koskinen ends this season with a 2-1 record and 1 non-decision. And that remains his NHL record. Goes back to the Tigers. And by season's end, he's not really doing all that well either. An .892 save percentage in 36 games compared to his .873 in the 4 NHL games. So while he is still set to be a part of the organization going into 2011-2012, there is a phone call that comes to him from back home that very quickly changes his mind. And in November, he surprises the Islanders by returning to his native Finland with a team called Kalpa, still in the Mestis League. They had recently lost their incumbent to the KHL, Continental Hockey League, in primarily Russia. And so they reached out because, in their own words, the 200-centimeter tall Koskinen's frame is perfect fit for a goalkeeper. It's a translation of the team's public release. Again, simply getting the eyes of people from across the ocean because he is really big. I also like that he measures in at exactly 2 meters. And when I started this, I did not know that 6'7" was exactly 2 meters. So we got that going for us now. Plays the rest of the season for Kalpa. 25 total games, has a .917 save percentage. So he signs another 1-year deal for the 2012-2013 season. A .919 save percentage this time in 49 games for Kalpa. And the next year is poised to be a beautiful local guy make good story in Finland. He signs with Espoo to return to that initial team and have this, okay, I'm just going to be a pro in my hometown. But much like his last season in Bridgeport, just a little bit into the season, a new opportunity presents itself. Unlike in 2011, he is not going to be filling in for any team that has lost a goalie to the KHL. Instead, Mikko Koskinen is heading to the KHL. He is being stolen out from under Espoo, and he's going to join Sibir Novosibirsk, which is one of the teams in this still relatively fledgling as the KHL organization at this time. And it should be mentioned, the KHL, particularly for the Russian-based teams, does have some limits on how many foreign players you can have, which a Finn counts against. There are particular restrictions on how much ice time a goalie can take. So, this is really saying that we are only going to get the best bang for our buck if this guy is exceptionally good during the limited time that we can put him out there. That is how much they believe in Mikko Koskinen. And he's pretty excellent for them. He has a .920 save percentage in both of the season and a half that he plays. I was about to say the 2 seasons, but that's not entirely correct because he is so good in that second year that it becomes desirable for an even bigger club, SKA St. Petersburg, one of the major powers in the KHL. So he's traded midway through the 2014-2015 season, helps them win the Gagarin Cup. Gagarin, I'm never entirely sure how to pronounce it. It's named after the guy that went to space, Yuri. That is the highest trophy for the KHL. That is their Stanley Cup and helps lead them to that in his first season. And again in 2016-2017 and caps off his 4th year in SKA Petersburg by allowing just 1.57 goals against on a .937 save percentage. Just remarkable, which means at this point we do have to now turn back to North America. In that 2009 NHL draft, I mentioned that 18 of the 21 goalies taken were at least 6 feet tall. The top North American prospect that year, Olivier Roy, which is indeed the son of Patrick Roy, was not one of those goalies. He was 5'11", And so despite the name, he is, because of that height, going to drop all the way down to 133rd overall, more than 100 picks after Mikko Koskinen. And this is not like don't judge a book by its cover. This does end up being the correct, overall shaking out of things. Olivier Roy does not have like a good goalie career altogether. And that means the team that drafted him, Edmonton, for this and other reasons, just as a whole, like, has been suffering due to goalie depth. But this was absolutely one of the factors, as they have in the years since just struggled to find a constant presence there in net. The Oilers have a new GM since then, Pete Chiarelli. He joined the team 9 days after being fired by Boston in 2015. Maybe that should have given the Oilers a little more pause, but at the very least, his first job is really, really easy. At the start of the 2015 draft, he just needs to take Connor McDavid first overall. Super simple. Great job by him. Great for the Oilers. He did that correctly. He does a lot more, though. He shuffles a lot of draft picks around. Largely, it's not great for them. One thing he does that is okay is he tries to solidify their goaltender room by going out and acquiring Cam Talbot from the New York Rangers and making Cam Talbot going forward their primary starter. But to back him up, I want to go ahead and put this speculation out here.
Speculation.
Maybe he looks back to Roy's failure and says, you know what, in 2009, we made the wrong choice. And so he looks at this Nordic brick wall that the Islanders took ahead of Olivier. He looks at this guy's recent success in the KHL, and he goes out and he gets Anders Nilsson, the goaltender that the Islanders took in the third round of the 2009 NHL draft, who is a little bit shorter than Mikko Koskinen. And so after both Talbot and Nilsson struggle that year, he goes through all of that thought process again, is like, wait, I need to make sure I do get the bigger one this time. And now, for the second straight season, he acquires a large Finnish brick wall taken by the Islanders in the 2009 NHL draft, who has had recent KHL success, Mikko Koskinen.
What a dime of a pickup.
Early on in that season, Cam Talbot is struggling. Through December 13th, he's just 7-9-2 with an .894 save percentage, whereas his backup, Mikko Koskinen, his reps are increasing because of that struggle, and in 11 of 16 starts, the team has won, while he's posted a .930 save percentage during that time, nearly identical to his KHL stats. While he falls off a little bit the next month, he's still by late January posting a .911 save percentage overall, 14-10-1 record in his 27 games, and this is not a particularly good Oilers team, so that is something. And for whatever reason, this is so infatuated, Peter Chiarelli, that he signs him to a 3-year, $13.5 million extension just partially through his first real full NHL season ever. And this is local Edmonton reporters are absolutely fucking baffled by this. And just days later, on the 22nd of January, he is fired. This is really the last thing that he does as Edmonton Oilers GM, is saddle them with this, frankly, pretty short-sighted extension for Mikko Koskinen before getting axed and just getting run the fuck out of town. Talbot's on the trade block now. No one knows what's going on. Koskinen, pretty content all around. He now has a lot of job security. He's happy to be there, and he just settles in as the primary goaltender for the Edmonton Oilers for the duration of this contract. He has a pretty solid 2019-2020 the year after this, at least until early March when he is shut down, or when the league is shut down. My apologies. Right, that's what happened in March 2020, not him getting shut down. He does come back, stinks in their 4 playoff games. .899, gets the next year moved to the 1B behind the aged Mike Smith. And a lot of this he attributes to not being able to be with his family during the COVID-19 crisis, because they're not able to come over to North America during this second full season. He just sucks, and it really affects his play. The next year, because of the dreadful extension, he is still there. This is the last year of the extension, but this time his family is also there with him. So he puts together a fine kind of swan song. Mike Smith is 39. He can't go out there every night. And the soon-to-be heir Stuart Skinner, not ready to step into a full-time role. So Koskinen gets the bulk of the starts that year. And in 43 games, helps the team to a 27-12 record. That is mostly because they are scoring a lot. He has a .903 save percentage in that time. But still, he's showing up and going to work. until the playoffs when Mike Smith takes over again, because now you can have the old guy run out there a little bit more. Pretty much all the rest of his final NHL days are spent on the bench during that postseason run. He does sign one more contract. This time he returned to Europe, a new country, Switzerland, where he's going to play for HC Lugano. 51 games during that 2-year deal, posts a 900 save percentage, and the team goes 25-30. Now, real quick, just in case any theoretical person listening to this with decision-making powers wants to say, we'll anonymize them. We'll call them Mr. X. In case someone like Mr. X wants to go out and say, like, I don't know, this is a big guy, and he's not that far removed from the NHL. He went 8 years last time without making a team. Maybe some team will sign him to a postseason thing, and he shouldn't be eligible for this. On April 3rd, 2024, Mikko Koskinen officially retires from all pro hockey, deciding instead to become an agent in Finland now. Because after all, Pekka Rinne was before him. Tuukka Rask is a contemporary of his. And now we've got someone like Jussi Saros, who is still there's plenty of Finnish goaltending to go around. But on that last one, Saros, 5'11", that simply won't do. I'll tell you what, you go to Finland, you find a good vantage point way up. You try to spot the tallest goaltending prospect that you can find. And if you do, I will bet you that right next to them, you will find my guy, Mikko Koskinen.
I mean, I like a lot that he successfully thwarted a potential example of nepotism by being better than Patrick Roy's son.
I feel like hockey is one more name recognition is guaranteed to get you within like the top 100 draft picks most of the time. I was shocked to see him go 133rd, and they were right. He was not good at being a professional goaltender.
You need to be able to occupy space that the puck cannot go into. If you're a little man, simply not going to get it done. We need a big guy. We need a Mikko.
We need a big guy, and in particular, in order for us to fully engage the tribunal, we need a third big guy. Xavier, I'm curious who this big guy is going to be.
So we can't talk about big guys without talking about the guy whose nickname is the same as his autobiography title, and that's Big Sexy. So let's talk about Bartolo Colón.
Yes.
Yeah. This hot man, god damn it. I can't believe I didn't realize you were going to do this.
Yeah, I thought that might be the reaction.
When you said it was two, I assumed this was one, and I was assuming the other was Pablo Sandoval.
No, actually.
Pablo Sandoval's a great one.
I mean, I'll tell you now, it was Adam Dunn, the big donkey. But
I'm glad you went with Bartolo.
Yeah, Adam Dunn does not I think of him and I don't think of a big guy. I might be wrong, but he doesn't have big energy.
Yeah, Adam Dunn doesn't have the energy of a man who's 6'7", 250, but he is. But we're not talking about Adam Dunn. We're talking about Big Sexy. We're talking about Bartolo Colón. Born May 24th, 1963 in Altamira in the Dominican Republic. Bartolo, his parents Miguel and Adriana, and his 5 siblings lived in a 3-room house out in the hills in an area called El Cope. They slept 2 to a bed, feet to head, but they got along pretty well. The kitchen and the bathroom were outside. They had a small black and white TV, but most of the time young Bartolo was outdoors. One of his favorite pastimes was throwing rocks at fruits on trees, both for fun and food. And he would climb trees to just take down coconuts if he couldn't knock it out with a rock. His father ran a grocery store that was right next to the house and stocked it with a lot of products that he grew in the fields up in the hills behind their house. His specialties were avocados, coffee, and cacao. By the time Bartolo was 8 or 9, he was working the field with his dad every day. Eventually, his father bought Bartolo a donkey called Pancho to help him carry the sacks of fruit and coffee beans out of the hills and down to the store. Quote, once I would load him up with 20 bags of coffee, which weighed 200 pounds. When I would pull down avocados, I would load him up with 200 of them. Sometimes I would ride on Pancho's back, but even then that was for work, when Pancho had to drag a heavy load. When he wasn't working the field, Bartolo was doing what most Dominican kids did, which was play baseball. He would walk an hour through the hills to reach the field at Rancho Nuevo, and once he even stole cigarettes from a store because someone told him that you can bribe the manager of one of the teams with cigarettes to get in the starting lineup. It didn't work, and His parents dressed him down pretty harshly after that one. One day, a team he was on was having a doubleheader. He was originally catcher. He caught the first game, and they had no one to pitch the second game. So he volunteered. In his own words, quote, "I won that game, and after that, I was always the pitcher. I liked pitching because as a pitcher, you were always in control of the game, like the conductor of an orchestra." At this point, he had fully given up on school. He was working for his father and working full-time for the government, climbing trees to cut down overgrown branches over roads with a machete. So he's a early teenager just going onto roads for the government to cut down trees with a machete, and then immediately going into the fields to pick fruit and load it up for his dad, and then going and pitching afterwards. He keeps pitching on the side. Eventually, he gets brought to Santiago for a bullpen session for some Dominican scouts. He was pretty nervous. He barely topped out at 86 miles per hour, but he did just enough to impress them. And soon after, Cleveland officially signs the now 20-year-old Bartolo Colón as an international free agent. They gave him $3,000 as a signing bonus, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for him at that time in the DR was like manna from heaven. He gave almost all of it to his family and kept like $30. He comes over to America and gets assigned to Rookie Ball Burlington in North Carolina. He shared an apartment with two other Dominicans assigned to Burlington, Julio Perez and Rafael Mesa, who was Jose Mesa, a.k.a. Joe Table's younger brother. During the season, there wasn't much to do when they were playing, so Bartolo did a bunch of cooking. Quote, "I was beginning the big sexy metamorphosis, I guess, putting on weight, which helped me build velocity. It was rice and beans, roasted pork, roasted chicken, all the good stuff that three Dominican 20-year-olds would be making if they had money and nothing else to do." During this season, this first season in the minors, Bartolo goes 7-4 with a 3.14 ERA. The next year, he gets assigned to High A Kinston and goes 13-3 with a 1.96 ERA, finishing second in both wins and ERA in the Carolina League. He gets shut down in August due to elbow soreness, but refuses to get surgery and decides to rehab instead. Regardless, he gets named the Minor League Player of the Year for Cleveland's entire organization. After this, Cleveland finally invites him to the Major League Spring Training Camp in '96. So with that, he officially retires from the cacao, avocado, and coffee picking business because he had been doing this in the off seasons every year since coming over to America. And his dad said, all right, you got to make a choice now. Are you going to be a professional pitcher or do you want to keep doing this back and forth? So he said, all right, I'm going to commit to pitching. I'm not going to be able to help you with the fields for a little bit, but the family was 100% behind him on this. Bartolo doesn't make the bigs out of spring training, but during this time he does become close with Manny Ramirez, who he later described as his best friend in all of baseball. And Manny absolutely loves Bartolo too. To be fair, everybody loves Bartolo. I couldn't find a single negative thing any teammate has ever said about this man. He always had an infectious energy to everyone. After 13 games at AA Canton Akron, where he had a 1.74 ERA, Bartolo gets promoted to AAA Buffalo. Then, in 1997, he finally makes it to the bigs. He wins the 5th starter spot out of spring training. His first start was April 4th, 1997 against the Angels. He starts off slowly. He gives up 4 runs in the first 2 innings before settling down and going 5 without giving up another run. He ends up with a no decision because the Angels won on an 11th inning walk-off grand slam by Tim Salmon. What a way to have your first game end. Manager Mike Hargrove preferred a 4-man rotation at the time, so Colón ended
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
You know, it was a different time.
This was in our lifetimes, man. That shit's like not that long ago.
We're getting up there in years, James, but Bartolo ends up as a yo-yo man, essentially. Whenever there's a reason not to have a 5th starter, they send them down to Buffalo. Still, there were 2 pretty significant events of note that year. So one, in May, Bartolo received a call in his hotel room with a death threat to him and his wife, where the caller read off his home address and said if he didn't pitch well, he was going to kill his family. He did pitch well in the game, and then the caller called again and told him he pitched well, but that he was still going to kill his family if he didn't continue to pitch well. The police had to start tapping his phones to try to trace the calls, and were never able to figure out who did it.
I mean, he continued to pitch well. So one might... do we know what the manager's phone number was?
So, the police did say they thought it may have been a prank, but nothing for sure. Bartolo said if it was not funny. The other better thing that happened to Bartolo that year is he threw a no-hitter in AAA while with Buffalo, the first in that team's near 20-year history. He walked the second batter, who then got caught stealing, didn't allow another base runner. He almost loses it on the last out, but second baseman Enrique Wilson is able to track down a blooper that looked destined for the grass. Over the course of that season, Bartolo goes 4-7 with a 5.65 in the bigs and 7-2 with a 2.22 in AAA. He does get left off the postseason roster, so he watches that Game 7 World Series loss to the Marlins from home in the Dominican with his wife Rosanna and his newborn son Bartolo Jr. The next year, it looked like he wasn't going to make the team out of spring training, but 2 injuries to starting pitchers during spring training meant that Bartolo once again made it as the last starter. He has a rough first couple games, but before he can get sent down again, he really picks it up. Heading into the All-Star break, he wins 6 out of 7 with 3 complete games, and by the break, he has a league-leading 2.46 ERA. Thanks to the All-Star selection process at the time, this was back when managers picked the reserves and all of the pitchers. And the manager of the AL team was Mike Hargrove because Cleveland had just made the World Series. So he picks Bartolo for the All-Star game, despite it being his first, full season. The game was at Coors Field, and Bartolo actually gets the win in the All-Star game, although it's essentially pure luck. He pitches the 5th inning and gives up a 3-run home run moonshot to Barry Bonds, who actually hits the Giants banner hanging from the facing of the upper deck. It counts as a blown save, but the AL scores 3 runs in the top of the 6th and goes on to win 13-8. So he gets a blown save and a win for giving up 3 runs in 1 inning on a Barry Bonds home run.
That's weird that he was eligible for a blown save in the 5th inning. Is it just any
I
blown
thought so
lead?
too. I think once it becomes an official game, like 5th inning and later, it counts as a blown save, or at least it did back then. But yeah, he gets a blown save and a win for getting 3 outs in the 5th inning and giving up 3 runs.
And they accuse our generation of being the participation trophy people.
I mean, look, it's the best kind of pitcher win. Technically a pitcher win.
Exactly. Bartolo finishes the season with a 14-9 record and a 3.71 ERA. In the playoffs, Bartolo gets his first real signature moment. He completely shuts down the Yankees in a 4-hit complete game in Game 3 of the ALCS, giving Cleveland a 2-1 series lead over the heavily favored 114-win Yankees. He said, "I keep video of the 9th inning from that game on my phone and watch it every once in a while. It's such a special memory. The crowd was so loud and intense, and when I struck out Tino Martinez to end the game, I couldn't hold back my excitement. I got chills seeing the fans so excited. I pumped my fist, and my teammates rushed them out to congratulate me." Unfortunately, the rest of his team couldn't keep up with Bartolo, and they do lose 3 straight. Even if they had only won 1, Bartolo would have taken them out in Game 7, but they couldn't even do that. So Cleveland loses their bid for a 2nd straight World Series appearance. After the season, they give Bartolo a 4-year, $9 million extension, which he used to buy homes for his parents in Santiago and buy homes for some of his siblings. Things weren't all great, though, because around this time, he also develops a massive fear of flying. And for a significant period of his career, he cannot get on a plane without being essentially blackout drunk. With the drinking and a massive love of chicken fried rice, Taco Bell, and McDonald's, 25-year-old Bartolo's weight balloons to around 250 pounds. And he's not very tall, especially compared to Lorenzen and Koskinen, so he's carrying a lot of weight on a smaller frame. Cleveland offered him a bonus that he can stay under 225 pounds, and he said he couldn't do it because he would lose velocity if he lost weight. In spring training, a trainer actually ordered him and Cecil Fielder to ride a 2-person bicycle that had the seats removed around the facility constantly to lose weight. Just ride it around. You can't sit down because there's no seats, and this will make you lose weight. And Bartolo said no. He said not only was he going to keep his weight, but if he gained more weight, it would make him a better pitcher. He did work out his legs, though. He thought the legs were important for his frame, so he said he could press around 800 pounds with his legs at that point. But he was like, no, the fatter I am, the better a pitcher I will be. Over the next couple seasons, Bartolo's mostly solid. Some glimpses of the spectacular. In 1999, he was 18-5 with a 3.95 ERA and finishes 4th in Cy Young voting. 2000, he's 15-8 with a 3.88. In 2001, he's 14-12 with a 4.09. In 2002, he starts off very strong, and he was 10-4 with a 2.55 ERA midway through the season. But Cleveland was struggling, and the Montreal Expos were looking for a big splash to both help the playoff race and get butts in seats. So on June 27, 2002, Cleveland trades Bartolo and minor league pitcher Tim Drew to the Expos for first baseman Lee Stevens and minor league prospects Cliff Lee, Brandon Phillips, and Grady Sizemore. Bartolo pitches well for Montreal. Goes 10-4 with a 3.31 ERA for a combined 20-8 record with a 2.93 that season. Finishes 6th in Cy Young voting. But the Expos missed the playoffs. Meanwhile, Cleveland gets a future Cy Young and 2 other future All-Stars. So if you're going to rebuild, that's a pretty damn good trade to make to do so. After this season, with Montreal missing the playoffs, they're like, all right, we can't keep Bartolo, so they trade him to the White Sox. He has a pretty nondescript 15-13 season, 3.87 ERA, nothing special, but Bartolo gets you wins. We could talk about how wins aren't a pitcher stat. Advanced analytics note that it's irrelevant, but at this point, teams like wins, and Bartolo keeps getting wins, even if his stats are pretty much as average as you can get.
Among the many things that he will eat are innings.
He eats innings and dubs, as Jameis Winston might say. In 2004, Bartolo's a free agent, and he wants 4 years, $52 million. The Angels offer him 4 years, $40 million, and he tells them to go pound sand. They come back with a higher offer, and he says no again. They keep coming back. Eventually, he does agree to a 4-year, $51 million deal, so just misses getting exactly what he wanted. But he uses that money to essentially rebuild his entire hometown. He builds a church. He builds a restaurant. He buys a fire truck because the town firefighters didn't have one. And then he also builds a baseball academy. So kids there wouldn't have to walk miles through the hills to like the next biggest field to play. And the academy is already like producing some good players. Jose Leclerc, the closer of the Rangers who won the World Series last year, is a graduate of the Bartolo Colón Academy. Despite a 5.01 ERA in 2004, he wins 18 games. He's getting those wins. And the next season, he wins a career-high 21 games against only 8 losses with an ERA of 3.48. And he makes the All-Star team. This is his second All-Star appearance, first in 7 years. In the ALDS, up against the Yankees, Bartolo starts the deciding Game 5. The Angels win, but unfortunately, Bartolo's shoulder gives out in the second inning, and he misses the entire ALCS with a partially torn rotator cuff and has to return home to the Dominican to rehab. While in the DR, he does get some good news, and that's in a decision that would make analytics nerds' heads explode this year. He wins the AL Cy Young, beating out Mariano Rivera and Johan Santana. It's a wild decision. It is the era of wins means more than anything else decision, but they can't take it away from him. Bartolo Colón is the 2005 AL Cy Young. Altamira has a massive celebration. They have a parade through the streets. Colón buys cases upon case of beer and sells them for 1 peso each, essentially a nominal fee to keep people from getting like too crazy. And the whole town has a massive barbecue. And from all reports, it was just a phenomenal time that no one will ever forget. Bartolo is also supposed to be resting at this point because he has the torn rotator cuff. And as we've talked about before, Bartolo doesn't want to get surgery. This is the thing with Bartolo. It's not that he's afraid of getting surgery, it's that he doesn't want to do it. He wants to rehab and rest rather than go under the knife if he can. So at this point, he's never had a surgery, and he's just trying to rest and recover. But in March of 2006, the first ever World Baseball Classic is being held, and Bartolo wants to play for his country. So despite still having a torn rotator cuff, he is on this team. He throws 14 innings of one-run ball, including 6 innings of scoreless ball against Cuba in the semifinals. Unfortunately, Odalis Perez cannot hold the lead, and the DR loses 3-1 to Cuba in a major upset. Whether it's due to him not resting and playing in this tournament or not, his shoulder continues to bother him, and over the next 2 seasons, he's on and off the IL, winning only combined 7 games. Remember, if Bartolo's not winning you games, he's not really doing that much else.
That's all he's giving you, yeah.
So that's the end of his Angels time. In 2008, he signs with the Red Sox, but continues to have arm issues. He finds out that he has bone spurs in his elbow and wanted treatment, but the Red Sox team doctors disagreed. So he leaves the team, gets placed on the suspended list for just not reporting, meets with Dr. James Andrews, the, Tommy John guy, as a private individual, and gets his first ever surgery paid for out of pocket by himself to remove 3 bone fragments from his elbow, including one that was the size of a pinky.
Okay, so did they disagree that he needed treatment, or did they disagree that there were bone fragments in the first place? Because that seems pretty incontrovertible.
The Boston team doctors said that based off of their view of it, he needed no treatment whatsoever, and it was essentially all in his head, and the bone spurs should not impact him in any way.
Okay, so it was like Republicans saying, yes, the temperature is getting higher, but we don't have to do anything about it.
Pretty much. After this, he does not go back to Boston. He goes back to the other Sox, signs with the White Sox, has more shoulder issues. So in 2010, he has experimental stem cell shoulder surgery. A team of doctors used fat and bone marrow cells from his hip and injected them into both his shoulder and his elbow. This surgery was so experimental, it was actually investigated and then later cleared by MLB because one of the doctors, Joseph Parita, had previously used HGH in surgeries for baseball players before that was banned. Colón said he wanted to get back into baseball, Parita recalled. He could not throw the ball without horrible pain, but he felt he still had something left in the can, so to speak. I told Colón this would be a lot less painful than facing Derek Jeter. He said, Derek Jeter, he has never been a problem for me. I always strike him out. As much as I love Jeter, that is a phenomenal line to say when you're discussing experimental surgery to possibly salvage your career. The treatment works, and Bartolo starts pitching for a winter ball team in the DR, and with that, he earns a 1-year deal with the New York Yankees. He was expected to be a bullpen piece, but he eventually ends up at the back of the rotation. He starts 26 games. He goes 8-10 with a 4.0 ERA. And most importantly, while with the Yankees, Mariano Rivera helps him get over his fear of flying and helps him stop drinking. So according to Bartolo, he was talking to Mo about his fear, and Mo simply said, look, if something bad happens on a plane, whether you're drinking or not drinking, we're all dead anyway.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah, nihilist Mariano Rivera. This I can get into.
I will not die sober.
And then he made Bartolo sit next to him on flights so he could make sure he wasn't drinking alcohol. And it worked.
I do have to just interject for one moment. It's good that he was teammates with Derek Jeter the year after saying that, because Derek Jeter might have taken it a little personally that Bartolo Colón so thoroughly wanted to minimize the slash line that he put up in 45 plate appearances against him, which is 429, 455, 643. Derek Jeter actually owned the shit out of Bartolo Colón is what I'm
That
finding.
makes it so much funnier. That's so good. Delirious, overconfident Bartolo Colón. It's perfect. After this season, Bartolo signs a deal with Oakland, and he goes 10-9 with a 3.43 ERA. Early in the season, he sets a major league record by throwing 38 consecutive strikes in a game against the Angels. MLB.com posted an article where they ran the numbers on how likely this is to ever happen, and they said it's 1 in 770,000. During the game, Bartolo's teammates started treating him like a pitcher who's throwing a no-hitter and staying away from him in the dugout, and he had no idea what was happening. The one person who tried to explain it to him, Gerard Parker, did so in English, and Bartolo's English wasn't great, so he didn't understand what he was saying while trying to explain why everyone was staying away from him. This happy-go-lucky guy is just sitting around having a good game, and everyone's ignoring him, and he has no idea why. The next season, as a 40-year-old, Colón has his best season in years. He goes 18-6 with a 2.65 ERA. He earns his third ever All-Star selection and finishes 6th in the Cy Young voting.
I feel like this is really when folk hero Bartolo Colón took over. And part of that, I think, is just lining up well with the internet. I know he's about to sign with the other team, but I think it started with this Oakland season that we were like, hey, that's Bartolo Colón guy, huh?
It definitely starts with the A's, but it really gets bigger with this next team. On December 11, 2013, Bartolo signs a 2-year, $20 million contract with the New York Mets. A lot of this is going to be Mets specific because this is when, people are really getting into like things like Twitter for sports clips and things like that.
Well, and it's when Bartolo Colón has to bat. That's really why it's when he becomes a folk hero.
So we will talk about this. With the Mets, Bartolo has a tough first month or so. In his third start, the Angels take him back to back in the first inning with Trout, Pujols, and Raul Ibanez each homering. In his fourth start against the Braves, the opposing starter was old teammate and fellow Dominican Ervin Santana. The day before the game, the two were talking, and Colón said, "When it's your turn to hit tomorrow, I'll throw all fastballs, but you have to do the same for me." Santana agrees. The next day, in the second inning, Bartolo comes up to the plate. He has not hit regularly in over a decade at this point, was never a good hitter to start out with. Santana throws a fastball. Colón swings so hard at it, he almost falls over and his helmet spins around his head. The next pitch, Santana throws a slider. Not expecting this, Bartolo swings even harder, and his helmet falls off him completely. And the crowd starts laughing their asses off. Santana throws another slider and strikes Bartolo out swinging. The crowd is going nuts at this point. Bartolo's pretty embarrassed before he understands that they're laughing about his helmet falling off and not him as a person. So after this, he asks the Mets equipment manager to get him an even bigger helmet so that next time he's up to plate, it spins even more and makes everyone laugh even more. The most I'm leaning into this thing you could possibly do.
It's you can't make fun of me for it if I'm making fun of me for it.
Exactly. When you're in your 40s and you've already had a 20-year career and you're just kind of having fun with things, that's the best. And he really just leans into the fun of baseball this year. Mets pitching coach Dan Warthen said they started playing hide and seek whenever Bartolo would start. Quote, he'd come out of the locker room and I'd be hiding. I'd have a tarp over me. I'd hide behind walls. I was in garbage cans, linen baskets. He would always find me and he would give off this belly laugh. Sometimes I'd jump out at him from inside a closet. It was like we were a couple of kids again. It's so fantastic. Bartolo is just enjoying life. Warthen also said that in spring training they would do sliding drills, and the pitchers had to do it too. But Bartolo would just raise his hand, wave his index finger, and say, "Bartolo, no slide." And it's just, I picture it so vividly in my head, him doing that.
It's a fact of life. Bartolo no slide.
Bartolo no slide. Eventually, he straight up told Terry Collins that he would only swing if people were on base because they needed him to pitch, not hit. And Terry said fine. So many times during the rest of the year, Bartolo would go up if there was no one on base and would tell the catcher, "I'm not going to swing. Just have him throw the ball down the plate." And he would just strike out in 3 pitches and get back into the dugout as soon as possible. And they just let Bartolo do this because he was doing enough on the mound to offset it. On August 8th of 2014, Bartolo gets his 200th career win in a 5-4 win over the Phillies, becoming the third Dominican pitcher to do so after Juan Marichal and Pedro Martinez. He finishes this season with a 15-13 record, a 4.09 ERA. If I could pick the average season for Bartolo, just in my mind, it's 15-10 with a 4.0 ERA. That is just what you're going to get from Bartolo, and it happens so consistently. In 2015, he is the Mets' opening day starter, and against the Washington Nationals, he becomes the third opening day pitcher over 40 years old to strike out 8 batters after Cy Young and Nolan Ryan. On April 23rd, he becomes the first pitcher 40 and over to win his first 4 starts of the season over the past 80 years. By June, he sets a Mets record for most consecutive decisions as a starting pitcher, 26 consecutive decisions in 26 starts, which just by chance is really hard to do.
I get that's once again a surreal participation trophy.
I love it though. It's the most
way to make it through 5 innings.
And make it through 5 innings where you're either going to get a win or a loss. It's never tied. For 26 games in a row, it is never tied when he makes it through these innings. He finishes this season with a 14-13 record, 4.16 ERA. And this is also the season where he first gets the nickname Big Sexy. He believes that it was inspired by a behind-the-back flip that he did against the Marlins on a Justin Bour grounder. But it's just a slow dribbler down the line. Bartolo picks it up, moonshots it behind his back, never stops walking towards the dugout. And the crowd goes absolutely nuts about this. Everyone's laughing, having a great time. The nickname was invented by Noah Syndergaard. Syndergaard is spreading this nickname all over the place. The fans love it. Syndergaard even buys Colón's entire family shirts with Big Sexy on it for Christmas. The Mets make the playoffs this season. Bartolo gets put in the bullpen. This is the first time he's ever come out of the bullpen in the playoffs. And his first outing is Game 2 of the NLDS against the Dodgers. I don't know if you remember, Bartolo was the man on the mound when Chase Utley slid into Ruben Tejada and broke his leg.
A perfectly legal and ethical slide.
A perfectly legal and ethical slide during the game that then MLB said, we're suspending you 2 games. And then he appealed it so long they just dropped the entire thing.
Sounds like he was never punished because it was a legal slide. At the time. At the time.
That's the thing. There was no rule against what he did when he did it.
That is true. The rule that they said he broke was the integrity of the game, not any specific sliding rules. Obviously, the Dodgers do win that game, but the Mets win the series. In Game 4 of the NLCS against the Cubs, he pitches an inning and third in relief. They sweep, and they make it to the World Series. And this is his first and only ever World Series appearance. As we talked about before, in his rookie season, he gets left off the postseason roster as Cleveland makes the World Series. So this is 20 years in the making for Bartolo. In Game 1, he pitches 2 1/3 out of the bullpen, does take the loss, becoming the oldest man to ever lose a World Series game. Another very Bartolo record. He pitches again in Game 4, gets a hold, but the Mets do go on to lose that game, and as we know, they lose that series. On December 16, 2015, Bartolo re-signs with the Mets on a 1-year, $7.25 million deal, and he enters the 2016 season as the oldest active player. And at this point, Mysaris Torres has also retired, so Bartolo is the last active major leaguer to have played for the Expos. Then on May 7th, probably the most popular Bartolo event ever, the Mets are facing off against the Padres in Petco Park. It's the second inning. The Mets are up 2-0. There's 2 outs. Catcher Kevin Plawecki is on second. As we've talked about, Bartolo will only swing if a runner is on base, and he also feels particularly strong about trying to do a good job when it's a catcher on base, because he wants to pick up his catchers. James Shields is on the mound for the Padres, and he throws a fastball off the plate for ball 1. Then he throws another fastball inside, but but on the plate for a strike to make it 1-1. And then on the third pitch, he throws another fastball right down the middle, and Bartolo turns on it, blasting it to the Western Metal Supply Co. building that serves as the foul pole in Petco.
He drives one, deep left field. Back goes Upton, back near the wall. It's out of here! Bartolo has done it! The impossible has happened!
The crowd goes absolutely nuts. The announcers are going nuts. The Mets all vacate the dugout and go run into the tunnel so that when Bartolo comes back, there's no one in there so they can run and swarm out.
Does he understand it this time? Has he caught up to these kinds of things?
At this point, I think he's seen this before, that he understands it. He's got a smile on his face, and it's just a fantastic moment. The man is nearly 43 years old at this point, and he breaks a record, becoming the oldest Major League player to ever hit their first home run. Every baseball fan of a certain age knows this video, and it is what makes baseball so great. I love it. I love it so much. He goes on to have a 15-8 record that year with a 3.43 ERA. He gets his fourth All-Star appearance when he gets added as a replacement for Madison Bumgarner. And he also becomes the 47th player to make 500 career starts. After this year, he signs a one-year deal with Atlanta, but he really struggles. He has a 2-8 record with an 8.14 ERA and a 1.78 WHIP in 13 starts and gets DFA'd in June. But 1 week later, he signs with the Twins and gets called up to start against the Yankees. 2 weeks later, he threw a complete game against the Texas Rangers, and at age 44, he became the oldest American League player to record a 9-inning complete game since Nolan Ryan in 1992. Later that month, he becomes the 18th pitcher to record a win against all 30 MLB teams after he beats the Diamondbacks. After this year, he signs with the Texas Rangers, gets released on March 24th, but then gets re-signed on March 26th, and gets called up 1 week later to start against the Oakland A's. 2 weeks later, he has possibly one of his best games ever, where he takes a perfect game against the Astros into the 8th inning in an eventual 3-1 win. And then on June 18th, he beats Kansas City. That takes him past Juan Marichal to become the pitcher with the most career wins ever born in the Dominican Republic, with win number 244. Finally, on August 7th, after an 11-4 win against the Seattle Mariners, Colón gets his 246th career win, moving past Dennis Martinez for the most victories all time by a Latin American-born pitcher. This is essentially the end of Bartolo in the majors. He does not pitch in the majors after that 2018 season. He does spend some time in Mexico, like many players we have discussed, but he does officially retire from professional baseball on June 2nd of last year, 2023. Overall, he starts 552 games over this 21-year career, 30th all-time for pitchers, does this for 11 different teams, has a record of 247 and 188 with a 4.12 ERA, a whip of 1.312, and an ERA plus of 106. Just barely above average, but for 21 years, enough to have 4 All-Star appearances in 3 different decades, and that one 2005 Cy Young. But what everyone remembers him for is just the big sexy time. The man who was just a fun baseball player who lent into the fun of being a 40-year-old still playing a sport essentially for children. And in a day when we're talking about big guys, I can't think of anyone that would be better to induct into our hall than the big sexy Bartolo Colón.
No, big sexy is great. We have 3 big guys, and we have one big task ahead of us that I feel like needs to begin with a big question to you, Diaz. If this category is just about the biggest guy, then we're done. Like, that's it. That's the conversation. We know which one of these guys was the biggest. To you, how should we be approaching this, maker of the category?
So, I very much enjoyed the Mikko story. And I guess within a hockey context, like, it's so rare to have a tall guy, right? So, like, tall is almost also the big of hockey. but certainly Bartolo was more in the spirit. I was looking for, I guess, like I want to say like the meme of it almost, but like not quite that. And even then, like Mikko was
all the scouting reports, like anything that anyone sees him talks about is this 200 centimeter goalie is perfect for us. A monstrosity.
Yeah, I guess like the short answer is Mikko is eligible.
Okay. I say all that for Mikko, but I think I can agree that this is between our other two contestants, Jared Lorenzen and Bartolo. If I may throw out one thing for both of them, and this isn't even necessarily something to decide between the two of them, but I don't know, I guess I just want to be careful to not do what it feels like it did happen to these guys at some points during their careers, which is making them into a circus act. That seems for both of them to have been the case, one certainly more than the other. But being careful about the shtick of it all because these guys had been so lambasted for their bigness at times. I do think it's interesting the way that their organizations treated them. Like Cleveland is going to try and give Bartolo the carrot. Here are some incentives for you to stay underweight. And the New York Football Giants very much take the stick to Jared Lorenzen. We will fucking take your money away if you are 300 pounds or more.
Well, it's weird with him because in doing my research, you see a lot of interviews and it's like, it wasn't just the Giants, like it was like his middle school football coach was like, if you don't fucking make 155 pounds, he said he would like be berated. And then once he did make it, then he gets brownies. Like the coach literally like, congratulations, here's the brownies, you made it. So it's like, you very much see how this fucked up relationship with food was kind of beyond his ability to avoid when it comes to Jared.
There's certainly a lot of external factors that made it worse than it would have otherwise been. I want to be careful not to take like some amount of individual agency out of it. But yeah, no, there's absolutely forces beyond his control that are harming him, actively harming him in this. And it's like that kind of unhealthy body image makes me think of, you look at like some of the linemen that get out of football, like Marshall Yanda, Ravens legend Marshall Yanda. Fucking love him. Huge dude playing. I don't know if you've seen Marshall Yanda in the last few years since he retired. He's just shed everything. He's just biking in Iowa constantly and doesn't have like an ounce of fat on his body now. And you think about the insane, unhealthy way that those linemen on the offensive or defensive side have to like feed into that. And yes, just as you're saying, like it's completely reasonable that some people would have a terrible relationship with food because of that sport. And it is interesting and ultimately tragic to like see this other side of that conditioning wherein like some guys, oh my God, I don't have to eat 5,000 calories a day. And some guys can't stop eating 5,000 calories a day.
Right. It's very sad, which is why I want to talk about Bartolo more because I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. Big, sexy, powered on rice and beans. His big old fat ass that gives him more velocity on his fastball. All of the good things that we think of with big guys are embodied in Bartolo. Like, I'm very glad you went with them. It was the layup of a pick, but like it was a great pick.
Honestly, that was the one reason why I debated it. I thought, is this too much of a, yes, we all love Bartolo Colón, but then I thought about it, I was like, no, Bartolo Colón is definitely worthy of being a guy and fits the category. I'm not going to impose arbitrary restrictions on it. I want to tell a fun story. It was enough that I enjoyed reading more about Bartolo so much that I read a 200-page autobiography this morning.
Now, in the 200-page biography, how many times does the Secret Family come up, out of curiosity? I do feel like we got to put the Secret Family out there real quick. I know Bartolo won't, but we need to.
The Secret Family does not come up. Yes, he did have to pay child support for someone, but that has nothing to do with being big sexy. So
it has a little to do with being big sexy, let's be clear.
Well, someone who was not his wife found him big sexy, but
precisely. The sexiness was big.
It didn't go with the spirit of my discussion here. But I mean, I love Jared Lorenzen. I love the hefty lefty. I have nothing bad to say about him whatsoever. But I really love Bartolo Colón. And I think that he lent into the fun of baseball and the fun of this 250-pound, 40-year-old playing baseball so much that it gave me and so many other people so much joy. you guys know where I stand.
Another point in his favor. If Guy recognized Guy, Noah Syndergaard, pretty big guy. So we got a big guy recognizing a big guy and giving the big sexy name. Something to consider. I mean, if we're going to get all of Bartolo's potential indiscretions out there, if I may ask for one moment, Xavier, you are a pretty big hardliner when we're talking about certain other halls and any kind of doping allegations. He does have a doping suspension for testosterone.
Yes.
I know it's not like an anabolic steroid. Your thoughts?
So I'm glad you brought this up because I was prepared to talk about this. He talks about this in the autobiography. Yes, Bartolo has one doping suspension for synthetic testosterone. He takes immediate accountability, apologizes to the entire team, doesn't try to fight in any way, takes the 50-game suspension. He comes back the next year, and that's when he has the All-Star appearance with the A's. The next season. He talks about how once you get caught, they test you all the time. And there's no evidence of him ever using anything other than in this one season where he tested positive for the synthetic testosterone. Because they tested beforehand, too, because of that shoulder surgery he had, because of that surgeon's prior links to using HGH. So there is this one season. If we want to take out this one season, I'm fine with that. But the fact that he does take immediate accountability, apologizes to the team, and comes back and has an even better season the year after than he was having that season, I think is a point in his favor and a reason why I didn't bring it up initially, but was prepared to talk about it if you did bring it up. Because I had a feeling that you would bring it up, James, because we have talked about this.
Diaz and I don't give a shit largely about the steroids as long as there's enough other stuff. I just want to make sure Bartolo Colón, I guess, had convinced you and had gotten past your anti-drug stance.
Yeah, based on what I've seen, what I read, not just in his autobiography, but in other contemporaneous accounts, it seemed like a very one-off and like truly contrite thing. Like I kind of put it in the same camp as the like Andy Pettitte one, where it was 100% that Andy Pettitte used HGH, but the evidence is that he used HGH one time while recovering from elbow surgery to get back faster, and not the Mark McGwire injecting myself with it for years and years on end. Obviously, there's a line. I think Bartolo falls on the not disqualified for being a drug cheat line compared to, even someone I also love like Robbie Cano, who gets busted multiple times on different years for it.
I'm all for it as long as you don't lie. Like, once you get caught, you just got to be like, yep, I tried. I didn't get away with it. As compared to your Rafael Palmeiro, righteous indignation, your Mark McGwire, I'm not here to talk about the past on this hearing that is specifically about what happened in the past. And also, Sammy Sosa, I gave countless interviews and became an English and American media darling. And then the second I get hard questioning, all of a sudden I don't remember how to speak English. All three of those guys, fuck those guys, because they were not accountable to it. But Bartolo Colón, there's a little extra in the rice and beans one time. That's absolutely fine. the pork was marinated in human growth hormone. It's okay. It happens.
Diaz, do you have any final pitch for Jared Lorenzen?
Not really. I love Bartolo Colón too. I'm perfectly good with Bartolo Colón. The whole Jared Lorenzen story is just like, God damn, I wish it had a happy ending. And it just didn't.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that, his legacy does live on through the foundation that he started and all that good stuff. But I think without any further ado, we had three great big guys this week, all notable in their fields for their own reason. But there's only one guy that comes from Dominican Republic. There's only one guy whose people paraded through the streets and had peso cervezas to celebrate with him after he won his Cy Young. There's only one guy that hit a home run to left field in Petco Park, and there's only one guy who will be inducted in this final episode of Season 11, and it is Big Sexy himself, Bartolo Colón. Bienvenidos a nuestra Salón de la Guy.
De hombre? No, de guy? Sí.
De guy. It's guy, because it's like...
Guy transcends language.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like, it's like how it's still El Heat. It's not El Calor. Like, true. It's not El Calor de Miami.
Los Lakers, not Los Lagos.
Exactly. So it is still nuestra salón de gay.
Pues, bienvenido. Y bienvenido al fin a todo el resto de ustedes. Back to English now in order to make sure that everyone can understand as we say some thanks to producer Craig and all the coders behind him, to our musical director Don Ham for that lovely theme music. Sports reference coming in clutch in the middle there with the Derek Jeter versus Bartolo Colón splits. Loved that. Thank you very much, Sports Reference. But most of all, thank you, dear listener, for joining us for another episode and another season. And we sure do hope that you will join us for another relitigation coming up next week when we decide to look back on some other deserving candidates. Hey, if you need to find where you can refresh your memory on some of the people we've talked about for the last couple of months, you can find all the information about the show at bit.ly/rememberthatguy, all one word, all lowercase. Anything else from the two of you as we get ready to head out here?
Basketball season now, baby.
Go Spurs.
I just want my generational 7'2" superstar from Cameroon to have a normal one. I just want it once. And like
just because this is the year does not mean this is a normal year.
Of course. Well, the weirdest year of all must be the year, right? So the only thing I'll say is I so hate the people that are like, oh, well, he played in the Olympics. Why can't he play opening night? Guess fucking what? A gold medal game is more goddamn important than game 1 of 82 against Doc fucking Rivers. Like, it just is. Okay? I'm all for being cautious, but like, goddamn, does it suck that he's not playing opening night. But you can feel both things. You can be upset that he's not playing and also acknowledge that it's probably the best thing.
If Embiid plays 60 games this year because he doesn't play back-to-backs and they rest him whenever they need to, preemptively, that's still better than the alternative. Like, I think that's what the expectation should be, that he plays 60 games.
Yeah, like would you rather us be 60-22 and get the 2 seed and Embiid's broken by the time we get there, or would you rather be 52-30 in that 4 or 5 range? But Embiid is like full power going into the playoffs. I know which I'd rather, but
for the record, Kevin Garnett did not play 82 games a single time during the final decade plus of his career.
Yeah, he's a fucking clown. It's a lot of years of the same fucking conversations, man. It's really, really a lot.
Maxey can play every game. He's got young legs. Rest Paul George, rest Embiid. Let Maxey run the show half the time. Because when you get to the playoffs, if Embiid has to go off the floor, you have a Maxey who has led the team in double-digit games by himself at that point.
If he is to make another leap as he has every year, the next leap is to MVP candidate. So that would be pretty great. I would really like that.
This is the year.
It is the year. It is the year.
I think we just need to maintain the mantra. I think everywhere that we've gone wrong in the past has just been abandoning the mantra. And just remember that this is the year.
It is the year.
And I'm one of your hosts, James.
I've been the very special guest, Xavier.
And I'm Diaz. And if a baker's dozen is 13, does that make a guy's dozen 11 or 14?
We have you biking forever, James, and Diaz a month away from another marathon.
You gotta do Baltimore next year. I looked at the comparison topography maps. If you're looking for a challenge, dude, you gotta do Baltimore next year.
I think because Philly's elevation, I think, is like 660.
I can't bring you beer this time because you drank one and then never came back for the rest of them.
It's going to be the tradition. I'm going to run 6 marathons.
Bring him one. Just this is much easier for you. Acquire one beer.
You get on the subway with one beer in my backpack.
As long as it's unopened, it's not a crime.